Hello everyone, this is not a live commentary of me solving the puzzles. I did do live commentary at first, but later decided that it was not good enough. Therefore I made this post commentary instead. Now to the first position and for the rest of the commentary. It is important to notice here that the black queen is on a5 and on the same diagonal as the bishop on d2. The knight is on c3 and the only piece in between the bishop and the queen, so the solution likely involved making a discovered attack. When I thought about this puzzle, I first thought of the move 10 knight e4 as it attacks both the queen on a5 and the bishop on d6. e4 is not, however, the right square to go to because the queen can go to c7 and defend the bishop on d6. Therefore, before I made the move in the puzzle, I thought about it a bit more and realized that the knight can jump to b5 due to the bishop on e2 defending it. b5 is a much better square than e4 since from b5 the knight controls the square c7, which means that white wins material by force. After seeing that, I made my move 10 knight b5. To my surprise, the puzzle continued with 10 queen takes b5, but it just means that I had to then play bishop takes b5, after which the position should be easily winning for white. Position number 2. Things to note here: black wants to take the rook on a1 next move. Also important to notice is that both white's bishop on e3 and the knight on h3 are undefended. There is also a pawn on f5 that attacks the knight on e6. White can't afford to lose the rook on a1 for free, so the first move had to be 23 rook takes a3. The only other option for the rook would have been to go to e1 and defend the bishop on e3. That would have been way too passive and would have given black time to get the knight out of harm's way. The move 23 rook takes a3 also weakens black's control of the 8th rank, which is crucial for the success of this combination. When the rook is diverted from the 8th rank, it is time to take on e6. The idea is to keep taking on f7 and promote the pawn if black takes the bishop on e3. So, in case the game continues with the moves 24 f takes e6, rook takes e3, 25 e takes f7, black has to go in front of the pawn and play 25 king f8 in order to prevent the promotion of the pawn for the time being. Had the puzzle continued this far, I had the idea of continuing with knight g5 and try to play knight h7 check so that the king would have to move and the pawn could be promoted. If instead black takes the pawn on e6, then white is just up a piece for a pawn, as the player controlling the white piece can protect the bishop on e3. Position number 3. This should have been an easy position to figure out correctly. Due to black's threats, the moves that white can do are very limited. Black's main threat is to play bishop takes f3 check, which would end the resistance very quickly. Therefore white has to check on the first move, and the only reasonable looking checks are 38 queen takes g4 check and 38 h takes g4 check. 38 f takes g4 check would also be a nice looking check, if not for the fact that it would be an illegal move, because the bishop on d5 pins the pawn to the king. I thought about the position a bit and decided to play 38 queen takes g4 check, which, of course, fails the puzzle. I think this was the first puzzle I failed here at Lichess. My idea was simple: when I check with the queen, the king has to go to h6 and then I can deliver mate with queen h4. Unfortunately, I forgot that the black queen controls that square. The only winning move is then 38 h takes g4 check, after which the king has to go to h4 and the mate comes with the moves 39 g5 check. It doesn't really matter if the king goes to h3 or to h5, because in either case the reply would be queen g4 mate. Position 4. Here the material is clearly in favor of white, one pawn and knight more, which should be quite often enough for an easy win. However, tactics can change the situation quite quickly. Here the key things in the position are that the white queen at a6 attacks the undefended rook on b7 and the black queen attacks the white rook on c1. Therefore, if the rook on a1 would need to move from the first rank, black could play queen takes c1 check followed by queen takes b2. The queen's awkward placement on a6 and the fact that the rook on a1 needs to protect both the rook on c1 and the pawn on a7 means that it is overloaded and it can be taken advantage of with the move 41 rook b takes a7. White can't really take back on a7 because of the continuation. 42 queen takes a7, rook takes a7, rook takes a7, queen takes c1 check, and the position there would be easily winning for black. That is why it was a better try to move the queen to d3. If now black takes the queen, white does not take the queen with the knight, but instead takes the rook on a7, after which both the queen on d3 and the rook on a7 are under attack. If the queen is captured back immediately, then of course rook takes a1 and black should win with ease. If black takes the rook after 42 queen d3, then there are two main possibilities in my opinion. One possibility is that white replies by taking on a1, in which case black takes on a1 again and is not only ahead in material by having the exchange, but is only ready to promote the c-pawn next. The other possibility is that white takes the unprotected queen on d2. After that, black should be lost. I did not play any of the aforementioned moves in reply to queen d3. I made the move 42 queen takes c1 check, which failed the puzzle. I kept walking on the right solution and decided that the only move that can work is queen takes d3, and it finally was the right move to make. I actually had to check this with the chess engine, and Stockfish 9 suggests that rook takes a7 indeed is the best move and that black should simply play either 43 queen d5 or 43 queen e4, and the position should be clearly winning for black. Position number 5. This one is much simpler than the previous position. The last move played by white, 33 f takes g4, opened the f-file, which is horrible for white since it revealed the undefended knight on f2. It should be quite clear that there is potential for a discovered attack on the f-file after f takes g4. Then one needs to think where the knight should move and if that wins material. The best square to move the knight seems to be g8, since the knight attacks the undefended rook on h6 while the rook on f8 attacks the undefended knight on f2. Since I did not find anything better or way to defend both pieces, I made the move 33 knight g8, which was the correct idea, and the puzzle is easily solved after that. So for the position number 6. Here the thing to notice is that the white king and queen are both on the first rank, and if the rook on d7 can land on d1 safely, it would lead to material gain for black. Therefore the first move you want to look at is knight f2, which would threaten both the rook on h1 and devastating check on d1 with the rook. However, it is also important to see in this position that black's king is not having that many squares to which it can go. Therefore, if black's 30th move is knight f2, white can reply with rook h8, and the rook can't really go to d1 and check the white king, because white is happy to go to the variation 32 queen takes d1, knight takes d1, knight f6 check, queen g8, which is also the only move, and then rook takes g8 mate. In view of the previous variation, it is a much better idea to play 30 knight e3 and force the queen and bishop, because that should win material no matter what white does. If now 31 rook h8, then simply knight takes f1 and black wins easily, since to knight f6 check black replies calmly with rook d8 and white is lost. I did move the knight to e3 and the reply 31 queen f3 was easily dealt with the move queen takes g2. Position number 7. This was a much more messy position than the one before. The material is even, and the question is, why was the move 19 knight takes d5 a mistake? Quick calculation reveals that if black replies with 19 bishop takes d5, then white can't take the bishop immediately, since it would be answered with a takes b5 and white would be down in material. Therefore you should calculate what happens when 19 bishop takes d5 is replied with 20 bishop takes d7. At that moment the material is still even. Black should now take the bishop on d7 with the queen, making the immediate queen takes d5 impossible in view of bishop h2 check, which wins the queen for the bishop. All this looks good for black, but maybe more consideration is still needed. White does not have to play 21 queen takes d5 of course, but can instead move one of the rooks to protect the queen. After this, white should get the lost material back, since the bishop on d5 is still unprotected, and if it moves, then white can take the bishop on d6 with the queen. Since black is up a piece, maybe bishop takes g2 is possible, and in reply to either rook ad1 or rook ed1. And now it would be really bad for white if the game continued queen takes d6, queen takes d6, rook takes d6, because after the trade of queens, black can play bishop takes h3 and be up 2 pawns. Therefore, the better reply to bishop takes g2 is king takes g2, and that actually makes the line not work for black. Because the first move is so promising, 19 bishop takes d5, I needed to work out a way to make it work in the continuation. Bishop takes d7, queen takes d7, and now either 21 rook ad1 or 21 rook ed1. And the way to make it work is to simply move one of the rooks to d8, making the move queen takes d5 undesirable for white once again. That being said, when I did this puzzle, I failed it by making the move 20 bishop takes g2 after bishop takes d7. Position 8. This seemed like a position where not much was going on, and there is even an obvious move, 24 knight c6, which seemed to win material with ease. The material in the position is even, but white has a better pawn structure, only 2 pawn islands for white compared to black's 3, and one of those pawn islands is an isolated pawn at d5. One must still look a little bit deeper into the position and see what is black's reply to 24 knight c6. The most ambitious move seems to be 24 queen g5, with the idea of playing bishop h3 next. It would threaten mate, so I need to play 26 g3, which would lose the exchange back, or at least that is what I thought. But when I checked this with an engine during this post commentary, it showed the obvious reply to bishop h3, which is bishop takes e4, and the pawn on g2 is easily protected. I thought about this position for a while and decided to move the knight to c6. When the move registered, the reply came and it was rook takes c6, which made the puzzle really easy. Now for the position number 9. It may be important to notice that the material is even, but more importantly the queen on h4 is lacking squares, which means that the solution was likely to involve the trapping of the queen. Last move, 34 queen h4, moved the queen out of the very nasty threat knight f4 check, not only fogging the king and queen, but also revealing a discovered attack on the queen by the bishop on d7. If the knight from e6 could land on g6, the white queen would have no safe squares to go to. I based my solution on ball calculation, and as I thought that 34 knight f4 check is still a good move, it was not of course, as white can just easily capture the knight with g pawn. I thought this position for a few minutes, and after a few failed attempts, I gave up and weaved the solution. The correct move was 34 g5, which I rejected in view of queen takes h6 check, but once again I did not look far enough, as the queen can be chased with the rooks in case of queen takes h6 check, king e7, and the queen can't be saved. If the queen does not take on h6, then it would need to go back to h3, allowing knight f4 check again to win the queen. Position number 10. This one had much more limited options as to what the first move might be, so it did not require me to calculate as much, as the only two possible moves for white are either to take the bishop or move the king to h1. It is much more likely that the first move is to take the bishop, since the goal of these kind of puzzles usually is to win material. Therefore the bigger problem is how to hold on to material without getting checkmated. So what happens after 12 king takes h2? The likely continuation is 12, knight g4 check, and now if the king goes to h1, then queen h4 check, king g1, and queen h2 mate. We can therefore rule out king h1. Is king g1 an adequate defense either? If now queen h4, I thought that queen takes c7 would protect the square h2 well enough, but black can just play e5 and black would be winning. Therefore white's best defense in the line 13 king g1 queen h4 is to move the rook to d1, and then black's best option is to take the draw with repetition of moves. Therefore by order of elimination neither move can be the solution. That leaves the moves 13 king h3 or 13 king g3. Out of the two moves, 13 king g3 is the more natural looking, as it offers better options of fleeing with the king to safety. I actually did not even consider 13 king h3 as an option when I tried to solve the puzzle. After some thought, I made the move 13 king g3. The obvious and scary looking reply 13 queen g5 was the move that continued the puzzle, and then I had to solve the problem of protecting the king properly. Moves like 14 f4, 14 knight e4 and 14 e4 came to mind in order to minimize the effects of the discovered check. I did not want to move the king to f3 since it would be replied with knight h2 check. If it were black to move, black would play knight e5 check and the game would be over as the queen is lost on c6. In the end, after thinking about this position for a few minutes, I decided that moving the pawn to f4 was the way to go and it would win in all variations, and the move 14 f4 was indeed correct and the last move in the puzzle. In case you are interested in what happens after 14 queen g6, white needs to play 15 f5, and now if he takes f5 then queen takes g6 wins easily, and if 15 queen g5 then knight e4, and white should be breathing a lot more easily since there is no discovered checks anymore. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye bye.